Second example, not about Jesus' birth, but about his death. This time I'll take Mark and Luke. Mark is our earliest gospel, and it tells about Jesus' death, of course, and the picture it paints is rather stark. Jesus is betrayed by one of his followers, denied by Peter. All the other followers flee. Jesus is alone. He's put on trial before Pontius Pilate. Pilate asks him, "Are you king of the Jews?" And all he says is, "You say so." That's the only thing he says in the entire proceeding. It's as if he's in shock. He's taken out to be crucified. He's flogged, taken out to be crucified. He doesn't say anything on the way. While being crucified, he's completely silent. Everybody mocks him. The chief priests mock him. The people passing by mock him. Both robbers mock him in Mark's gospel. And at the end, Jesus hanging on the cross finally cries out, my God, why have you forsaken me?" He actually cries it in Aramaic, "Eloi, Eloi, lema sabachthani." And then he dies. The only words he says the whole time, "Why have you forsaken me?" You contrast that with what happens in Luke's gospel, which is very different. Jesus is betrayed by one of his followers. He's denied by Peter. We're not told that the disciples fled in Luke, but they don't seem to be present. Jesus is condemned to death by Pontius Pilate, and he carries his cross. But on the way to be crucified, he's not silent. There are some women who are weeping by the side of the road, and he tells them, "Don't weep for me, weep for yourselves and for the fate that's to befall you and your children." While being nailed to the cross, Jesus isn't silent in Luke's gospel. Instead, he prays, "Father, forgive them, for they don't know what they're doing." While Jesus is on the cross in Luke's gospel, he actually has an intelligent conversation with one of the robbers. One of the robbers mocks him. The other robber tells him to be quiet because Jesus has done nothing to deserve this. And he turns his head to Jesus and says, "Lord, remember me when you come into your kingdom." And Jesus replies, "Truly I tell you, today you will be with me in paradise." Jesus in Luke's gospel knows full well what's happening, and he knows why it's happening, and he knows what's going to happen once it happens. He's going to wake up in paradise with this robber beside him. Jesus is calm and in control of his situation in Luke's gospel, even if he's not in Mark. And the key factor comes at the end, where instead of crying out, my God, why have you forsaken me?" He doesn't cry that in Luke. In Luke's gospel, he cries out, "Father, into your hands I commend my spirit." And he dies. This is a Jesus who is in control of his situation, who knows that God is on his side and is comforted by the fact. He's not in despair. He doesn't anguish over why God has forsaken him. What happens, though, is that people take Mark's gospel and they take Luke's gospel and they smash them together into one gospel. And then they take Matthew and they take John, they put them all together, and you end up with the 7 last words of the dying Jesus. The so-called 7 last words of the dying Jesus are the 7 last things Jesus says. He doesn't say these 7 things in any one gospel. There are different things that he says in different gospels. And when you put them together, what you've done is you've created your own gospel. A gospel that is unlike Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. You've made your own gospel, which is different from any of the others. These gospels, in fact, are all different and have to be read for what their differences can tell us.